sexuality was considered a natural, normal, pleasurable activity which had the potential to raise your consciousness and be a pathway to union with the source. And the great marriage celebration, which we know in many, many cultures was practiced, had to do with this idea of sexuality as magic. Not only was the divine feminine a huge part of the equation, it wasn't women ruled. People like to use the word matriarchy, and that's not true. They were more egalitarian societies in general, and they were far less warlike. The make love, not war kind of thing makes sense. In any case, so women were raised. If you think about how it was for a woman to be raised, I have a story in my book about a woman named Inanna, who is actually a goddess name, to respect themselves, to honor other women, to see women in important roles in society, not just priestesses, but they were artisans, craftsmen, hunters, whatever. And they were raised to understand and know their bodies from the beginning. So first blood, the first experience of one's menses was often an incredible ceremony with women. They would go into a seclusion, and the aunts and the grandmothers would give them gifts, and they were told great stories, and they were told about sexual energy. They were told the truth. And they learned to honor themselves. A lot of people, the fear is, if women are just going to have a great old time, they'll just be promiscuous. But promiscuity comes from a lack of self-respect. So here's a general set of cultures, and they were all through old Europe. The research is pretty vast, that honored women's sexuality, that honored the divine feminine, that saw this incredible ability to create life is an amazing gift. But it wasn't just about creating life. It was about the energy that is created when you have a loving union. And what happened is there's a Kurgan Invasion. I'm not as good a historian, but they're great historical, very well accepted now texts that explain. The invasions occurred in about 600 years. And they came from a number, if we think of Attila the Hun, that's basically it. And these cultures brought a very harsh sky god concept of divinity. Up until then, the idea of the divine feminine or masculine was this all-giving, loving, knowing kind of parental, nurturing figure. So what they brought with them is this concept of herding and animal husbandry. Now, it wasn't that people didn't raise animals before, but the herding culture was very different. And they devastated these agrarian cultures that had been very peaceful. And they brought their sky gods. What happened is they began to intermingle once they conquered them. They intermingled, and there was a kind of time where there was a bit of a blending of the two. So you'd have the god, but you'd also have the goddess mating with the god to give the god his authority on earth. But essentially it was, punishment-oriented, it was control-oriented, it was very hierarchical. And what really changed, because up until then, cultures were matrilineal by and large, which means not that women ruled, but that the children were traced through the mother's family. There was never a question of who this child belonged to. There was no concept of bastards. There was none of that. And now, jealous controlling, I need to pass this on to my son. Did you have sex with somebody else? And the insanity of it became great. So hymens became important. Virginity did not mean, the word virgin didn't mean anything about having a hymen or never having sex. It meant a woman unto herself, meaning she didn't have marital ties. So when this all began to shift and there was more control and possession and amassing of wealth and all that, and simultaneously you needed to pass on to your male heir, you had to figure out whether a woman had sex before. So you got these huge disparities where the daughter was his possession, and if you read the Old Testament, you'll read all of the laws about if this virgin daughter was despoiled, the father got paid a fine for despoiling his goods. And often she was stoned to death. But what they did often is they found a man to marry her really fast, or the rapist would, and that's still true in South America. If somebody's accused of rape but agrees to marry the girl, then all is well. Talk about insanity there. So sex became procreative, it became very phallic-oriented, and women were repressed in as many ways as they could figure out. Yeah, there is an empowerment that occurs when a woman really clicks in and is aligned with her own sexual energy and feels good about it. The patriarchal cultures had to do some very amazing things to repress the power of women's sexuality. Everything from shaving their heads, making them wear burqas. They were beaten as wives because they were too wanton in the Middle Ages. Stoning them if they became pregnant, regardless of what the male's culpability in it was. You name it. It's amazing women maintained and retained any sexual energy at all. But our sexuality, men and women, is energy. It's very powerful energy. And that's why we have so much repression, is that there's a fear about what that's going to do. So, yes, the power of the feminine is the power of the creative force, obviously, and it's magnetic. And I've thought a lot about why is it that the whole thing about covering women, making them ugly, we still have cultures where they have to cover up and this and that. And one of the things that I believe is that it's so magnetic and so overpoweringly attractive to males or other females that are attracted to females that here's what I think, is that the sense of feeling weak in your patriarchal culture, you have to make wars and you have to be in charge and you can't let women have the better of you, all of those things. So this magnetic energy, this draw, this fascination that I think is nature's natural way, now becomes dangerous. And so patriarchal cultures had done everything they can to suppress the power, to make women into these gray little sparrows instead of the incredibly beautiful birds they really are. And women were understood as actually being the most sexual of the genders. Because our capacity, and this is true, physiologically, our capacity for pleasure is greater. Longer, we have more orgasmic potential, all of those reasons. And the ancient people knew this. And so women were seen as very sexual beings. And when you look at the stories of the goddess in Native American cultures, as well as the European and Middle Eastern areas where the archaeological digs have been done, what you see is a celebration of this incredible sexual energy of women. What's happened with this disconnect is both men and women have lost. For many, many cultures, just getting it on, in fact, in the third world, there's still this idea if the man gets his orgasm, that's all we need. But many men feel the loss of having a mate that really, truly enjoys them. And yet they've tried. Our culture has had all these how-to books and all this, you must enjoy sex. I mean, this is what the churches are doing now. Yes, sex is good. Now enjoy it because you're married. And I'm seeing a couple I just saw this morning. They had that Catholic prerogative. Okay, now you're married. And voila, all of a sudden, all the restrictions are off and you're supposed to enjoy it. But the body has been repressed. So the loss is enormous because for me, the most important part of our sexuality is our connection with spirit. And it is a very spiritual experience, even if it's just a pleasurable, wonderful time. But for some couples, they can take it much more into the heart level and into transcendent experiences. So to me, the loss is enormous. I want to encourage women to really allow themselves to go through the process. It's a journey to reclaim their sexuality, to reclaim their yonis. And my whole purpose in the book I wrote is about helping women see that it's worth going on this journey. Sex isn't about what you do with somebody else. It isn't something you give to somebody. It isn't something that you do to make sure the other person is happy, which is all the reasons that many women approach sex. This is something for you. And there are ways that I help women find that energy in their bodies without the I've got to perform for somebody else thing going on. So I think we're in a powerful renewal time, quite frankly. Okay, now we have to teach everybody how to have orgasms. Women need to, come on, buck up now. You got to have orgasms. And then we had to have all these cookbooks about how to produce orgasms, which became the male's job, which is a kind of ridiculous thought, but it's still alive and well. And then the idea of bigger and better orgasms. So we have the ESO. Let's watch a movie where somebody has an orgasm for 2 hours. I remember going, do you want to watch that movie? Somebody asked me that. I go, why? Anyway, so it's become this huge freak show around who can do it better. Can women ejaculate, which is fine if they do naturally, but now we make it another performance. You're not really fully realized unless you ejaculate. I'm thinking, we're all stuck in this performance thing. We're bigger and better, or more and longer, or more often is all what this is about. And what has been lost is a sense of just pleasure, just being in the moment, being in the truth of what you want to have happen at that moment. You're not pleasing, you're not servicing somebody else, and allowing something to emerge, and also being able to be in different places. The difference in males and females, if we just go with the gender thing, is that the arousal timing is much faster. The testosterone effect is very much, moves very quickly to wanting to orgasm. And all of the ancient, more esoteric teachings, sexual teachings, have to do with allowing the male to kind of hold off or get behind his arousal curve and be able to let things build and allow his partner to build her energy too. That's all about pleasuring, again, not about performance. So if guys go, okay, now I have to learn to hold my ejaculation, then you've got another performance problem. There's many, many solutions. I always tell people there's this huge, wonderful room of possibilities and just great jewels and great opportunities. And if you get away from this, sex has to go in a certain way, and we have to end with orgasms, or at least the guy's orgasm, it usually stops it. We're all lost, So I have to bring people back to this real basic concept of pleasure and how to give pleasure and how to receive it. There's often imbalances in one or the other. So that's where I see it going. That's my hope for the future, is that if I and others can teach this pleasure model, the pleasure paradigm, which takes a lot of grounding, because people say, oh, pleasure, I'm all about that. And what they're thinking is the oxytocin release of an orgasm. I thought, well, that's impressive, but that's not pleasuring. So you have a lot of work to do around allowing people, men and women, to just allow pleasure to emerge and to be there and be in connection with each other and be able to speak the truth about what you want to have happen at that moment. Now, often women need to slow it down, and men are kind of in a hurry, so you're going to have to work with that dance.